And what's the message here? So naturally, over the ages, the great commentators to the Torah have tried to give us some illumination on the subject. And one of the mysteries is this week's Parsha Pinchas. The Torah begins, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, Heishivas Chamosim al b'nei Yisrael. Because of him, my anger against the Jewish people was mollified. Because of his act of kanos, his act of zealotry, that he stood up and killed Zimri and Cosby. And therefore he averted the fact that the terrible punishment from heaven would have occurred to the Jewish people because they were so zealous in their transgression that they behaved brazenly and publicly. So therefore, the response would have to be open and public. And Pinchas averted that, and only the perpetrators were killed by Pinchas. So he is the ultimate kanoi. He's the ultimate zealot, the man that takes the law into his own hands and whose love for the God of Israel and the people of Israel is of such a nature that he is willing to commit such an act. And he doesn't know the consequences when he kills them. Only later it comes out that he did a great thing. But as Rashi points out, the people of Israel originally said, look at this guy, murderer. Is the chutzpah to do something like this? So let's just think about that. Pinchas is a zealot. So if one accomplishes through zealotry, if one accomplishes through such behavior, then we would think that the Lord would bless him, that he could double down on it again. Now that we have such a zealot amongst the Jewish people, and he's willing to risk everything to do acts on behalf of heaven, so let him continue. There are going to be other instances in the life of Pinchas that an act of zealotry would somehow be in place. And what does the Ribono Shalom do? He takes zealotry away from Pinchas. And he says, he knows St. Lo as Brisi Shalom. I'm going to make him a man of peace. He's going to be the symbol of harmony in Jewish life. The Tanakh points out to us that Pinchas later was the Kohen Gadol. In the time of the end of Yoshua and the beginning of the period of the Shoftim. Now, the Kohen Gadol is not a zealot. He's the opposite of a zealot. Mitalmidov Shel Aaron, it says in Pirkei Avos. Be a disciple of Aaron, of the Kohen Gadol. Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom. You love peace, you pursue peace. Ohev Sabrias, you love people, which is the hardest thing to do. You can love peace, but it's hard to love people. Umakorban la Torah. So one would think that the reward and the goal that heaven has set for Pinchas is exactly the opposite of what he was. He's a zealot. So the Torah should say, he knows saying lo as brisi kanos. We always need a zealot. We always need somebody to stand up and do something radical. So since you did it here, you'll have a chance to do it later too. Instead, the Torah says, he knows saying lo as brisi shalom. So to speak, I'm going to extract from him every ounce of zealotry, because otherwise you can't have peace. A zealot is not ever going to make peace. That's a difficulty that we have in our own world today, in our own situations. It's hard to make peace when we're overcome with zealotry and revenge and justifiable anger. And when you're angry, so Chazal say, Al Tarat says, Chavero B'shas Kaso. When a person is angry, there's no use speaking to him. You have to let the anger pass. Because in anger, terrible things happen. Terrible words are said. You can never retract them. My father-in-law, blessed memory, Rabbi Levine from Detroit, told me that he was in they called it then, it was yeshiva, a kollel, but they called it a Talmud Torah. He was in the Talmud Torah in Kelm, which was famous in Lithuania. My father-in-law told me that he was there 7 years, and for 7 years he worked on himself not to be angry. And I knew him for decades. Never saw, he never was angry. There are a lot of things that a person can be angry about, day in and day out. And if you're a rabbi, you can multiply that equation. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is here, he defangs Pinchas. He says, because you were a zealot, I'm going to give you such rewards. You're going to become a Kohen Gadol, you're going to have kahuna, and your descendants will be Kohanim Gedolim. The Gemara says that in the Bayis Rishon, the Kohanim Gedolim were all descendants of Pinchas. But the Kohen Gadol is shalom, is peace. He has to be willing to accept all the sins. So we see here a very peculiar twist. Because if Kanos is so great, then the Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyachol should have doubled down on it. Good, Pinchas, now the next time something happens, do it again. Instead, he said, no, that's it. Forget it. And the Gemara says that Pinchas was the only Kanoi in all of Klal Yisrael. Never happened again that the Lord approved of such behavior. Now, we have a famous medrash that all rabbis use, that Pinchas is Elio. The great prophet Elio Hanavi is really somehow Pinchas. Now, how we understand that it really depends on what size shtreimel you wear. Many take that literally. Pinchas morphs into being Elio. Others say the soul of Pinchas returns to be in the body of Elio. Others say that as far as Elio is concerned, Pinchas is his role model. That's who he wants to be. But however we will interpret that, whichever stream we want to follow, says Pinchas Elio, Pinchas is Elio. So let's look at Elio. This year, the Haftorah of Pinchas is the Haftorah of the 3 weeks. So it's not the regular Haftorah. The regular Haftorah is the story of Elio on Mount Carmel. But we won't hear that Haftorah this year because the way the calendar falls. So we'll hear the words of Yirmiyahu Hanavi instead. But let's do the story of Elio. Elio is a lone wolf. He says, Nisharti ani levadi novi Lashem. I'm the only one left. The Nevi'ei Abal, there's 400 of them. There are thousands that back them. Yeah, they're the ones that say they represent the Jewish people. They're the ones that offer sacrifice. And I'm alone. And not only that, the king wants to destroy me. Achav says, you're the one that destroys the Jewish people. Sharti ani levadi novi Lashem. I'm the only one that's left. Nevertheless, Elio says, Kano kinesi. But I'm a zealot. Even though I'm the only one, I'm 1 against 400. I'm going to show the Jewish people the right way. And in so doing, we're going to kill the 400. And the Rebbeinu Shalom agrees with him. And in the famous contest that's recorded for us in Tanakh, so the Nevi'ei Abal try everything possible to make their sacrifices occur. And nothing happens. And like all Nevi'ei Abal, they double down on them. And they're willing to cut themselves, mutilate themselves, all for the agenda, all for the Avodah Zarah. And Elio mocks them. He says, maybe the Baal is sleeping, so you got to scream louder. Maybe he doesn't hear you. And maybe it's the lunchtime break and he's not working. Mocks them. And he is blessed with the great miracle. The fire descends from heaven and consumes the sacrifice. And even though he poured water all around, the fire eats everything up. The fire doesn't usually eat up the water. And he says, Kano kinesi lashem elokoi. In a fit of zealotry, I did all of this for God. And the Lord performs miracles for him. So evidently, heaven agrees. Elio does the right thing, just like Pinchas did the right thing. That's part of the idea of Pinchas Elio. Similar circumstances. The whole people are on one side, and this person is on the other side. And it's a very difficult situation to maintain, as we are well aware. So then again, we would think that since Elio is the perfect kanoi, he is the one that represents true and legitimate zealotry, and that is necessary for the Jewish people to survive. So the Rebbe Shalom should give him a reward. What? You be the zealot. That's your job. And just the opposite occurs, just like by Pinchas. Hinei anochi sholeach lachem es Elio hanovi lifnei bo yom Hashem hagodol v'hanora. God says, I will send to you Elio hanovi before the end of time. And it will not be kanos. It will be harmony and peace and mutual understanding and a tolerance for the older generation and the younger generation. So it's again the same thing as by Pinchas. Pinchas Rebbeinu Shalom rewards him. Hineni nosein lecho as brisi shalom, and hereby so Elio Hanovi now he comes to every Brit. But so by Brit, almost everybody is happy except the baby. And he comes Pesach to the Seder. And sometimes we meet him on the street and we don't know that it's him, but he's always there. What happened to the Kanoas? What happened to his personality? The Rebbeinu Shalom rewards him with things that are contrary to how he got the reward. He got the reward because he said, Kano kinesi l'Hashem l'goy. So there's such a profound, subtle message in Pinchas and in Elio. And that message is, there's a place for kanos, but there's no place for a person that's a kanois. There's a place that sometimes you have to stand up. You have to be unpopular. Rashi quotes the Medrash that the tribes of Israel wanted to destroy Pinchas. They said, that's because, he's descended from Yisrael. This pedigree is imperfect. A Jew doesn't behave like that. So the Rebbeinu Shalom had to confirm that the act that Pinchas performed was not only legitimate, but necessary. But Pinchas does not become that person. I have good reason for Pinchas to survive. And in order for him to be an effective person, he cannot be the kanoi. I'm going to make him the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol has to be nice to people. The Kohen Gadol has no salary. People have to contribute. He's dependent upon public goodwill. I remember a time, and my father was part of that generation, where rabbis really didn't receive a salary. So what did rabbis receive? Yeah, he had to live. So they lived off of the weddings and funerals. The people paid them for their services then. And every Shabbos, when you got an aliyah, so you gave $3 to the shul and $2 to the rabbi. And that was accepted. So if you were that dependent upon people for bread on your table, so the nature of people is you try to be nice to the boss. You don't want to start up with him. And in my humble opinion, and you all know that I'm never wrong, that's why the great Orthodox rabbis of the early part of the 20th century in the United States were not very effective in stemming the coming of assimilation and the coming of the conservative movement, etc., because they didn't speak out about it, because they couldn't. It was against the tide completely. So the Rebbeinu Shalom put Pinchas into that situation. So he said, first, I'm going to make him a Kohen. And Rashi points out, the Gemara, that the Pinchas somehow wasn't part of the kahuna until that pasuk. Bris kuna solom, and I'm going to make him the Kohen Gadol, and his job is shalom. His job is harmony, peace, quiet. I'm not going to make him a kanoi. He'll never again do kanos. And that's the same thing with Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi rises to the occasion, he said, because he says, Kano kinesi. The Rebbeinu Shalom says to him, okay, Eliyahu, you had your shot. Now I got a job for you. There's a bris Monday. I want you to go there. Pesach, I want you to go there. There's going to be a time when the Jewish people have to have hope for salvation and redemption, for better times. That's your job. You tell them. It's a complete transformation of the person. It's not who he is, and it's not how he got there. And I think that's such a profound lesson for the Torah. You know, there are those that look at the Torah as a great novel, God forbid. So they do psychological studies on the characters that the Torah describes to us. Like Freud wrote a biography of Moses. He psychoanalyzed him. But that's not the way Chazal looked at it at all. Chazal looked at all the characters, so to speak, in the Tanakh, etc., not as individuals, but as prototypes. People that we would meet in our time as well. You have to be able to recognize them. You have to be able to see them. You have to put them in the background of Jewish life and Jewish history. And then somehow everything that happens makes a little more sense. Not completely, but a little more. So Pinchas should not be viewed as an angry person, because we see that Torah says he's a person of peace. But a person of peace can be a kanoi for one instance in his life. Eliyahu looks like a prophet of wrath. You'll see all the great art museums in the world. There always is a rendition of Eliyahu at Har Carmel. And the rendition is always of an angry person in a fury. That's not Eliyahu. That's Eliyahu, one instance when his kanois is justified. But as far as everything else is concerned, Eliyahu is Malach HaBris. Eliyahu is our guest at the Seder. Eliyahu is Ve'ishiv Le'ivovos Albonim, Le'bonim Alavosam. And I think that that is a strong idea that would help us understand many of the instances in Tanakh, many of the narratives, and be able to draw proper lessons from them. And they would be our sources of inspiration. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and thank you for coming. And we'll hear good news.
He lost it for a while. It went to Ellie from Shmuel was from Isilmar, and
Right.
Ellie, then they got it back.
Right.
And so even though we promised it forever, they did take it away.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question. People who are